Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by the team behind The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. Author, illustrator, co-writer, and co-director Charlie Mackesy, co-director Peter Baynton, and producer Cara Speller. The animated short comes to Apple TV Plus on Christmas Day. Charlie, I want to start with you and go back to the book itself, basically. And I guess, can you just talk a little bit about the impetus behind the story and basically building out the world that we see, obviously, in the short?
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, the book began as an unintentional book. It was never meant to be a book. It was a series of drawings that I posted on Instagram, really. And they were, the characters between the boy and the mole originally, and they were just talking about things that were important to them. And I kind of wanted to find a way of talking about stuff that was important, that was very gentle and quiet, and it just seemed to be the boy and the mole that, was the vehicle for those kind of conversations. And then I was pretty shocked by the reaction, and, on social media. And when the horse appeared, and there was a drawing I did of the horse and the boy asking the horse what the bravest thing he'd ever said was, and the horse said help. And I think that was the first time I really kind of was really shocked by the response worldwide, from hospitals and schools and even the army in Australia and Canada, and wanted to use a drawing. And so I guess, I just kept the drawings going and the conversation between the four of them going, and listening to what people felt about them. So it was very much an interactive journey, with people being very vulnerable about how difficult life can be. And also just, about the joy of cake, or just, there's so many facets to the characters, whether light or difficult. And in the end, after a year of posting them, I think I exhibited the drawings, and an editor from Penguin was there, and she approached me and said, would you consider doing a book? And I wasn't sure, because I didn't think there was a book there to be had, but we did. She persuaded me, and I wasn't sure if it'd be any good or not. And then we did a book, and again, I had the same kind of feeling of, well, someone might like them, or my friends might buy one, And so again, I was very shocked and surprised by the response to the book. And I read a lot over that initial 6 months. I read a lot of emails from people who had been affected by it, and they were people from all walks of life, and whether they were 80 or at school, and some were really struggling. And then when lockdown came, it got even worse, and the emails became more intense, and some people were dying, or they were with a mother who's dying, or they were missing someone who had died, and they're saying the book was comforting them. So, it was a sort of a journey of surprise and privilege to be part of people's lives, I suppose, and to be able to speak into them in a very I guess the characters don't have much guile. You can trust a horse or a boy or a mole. There's something very innocent about them, which I've enjoyed. And then, the film came along, we're writing, and Cara and Peter and everyone, joined up with me. And of course, that was a whole other thing, because I have spent most of my life not really being in any kind of team. And then Isabel Waller-Bridge, it was suddenly became a rather beautiful journey made with other people. And obviously there was a beautiful journey before with people on Instagram and friends. And so it was this kind of all around the story were threaded endless lives speaking into it in ways I couldn't. And they all had that unique understanding that I did not have. And so what I would love about it is that, you make something or you say something, and then you watch the response, and in ignorance and complete amazement that people can see things that you never would or could. And I think that's why I've loved this journey, and why, making the film was so moving, is because we had 150 people or whatever. And, the core was a few of us writing it and editing it and directing it, co-directing it. But it was largely a journey of kindness and friendship, and we've all become friends. And so I will always love the process as much as I do the product. And whenever I see, if I can pause the film at any point, I will remember instances of deep conversation, occasional argument, disagreement, but always in kind of kindness. But, it was a journey made with so many of us, And it's why I will always be grateful for those initial characters, because they brought me in from the cold, if you like, and it introduced me to a whole world of relationships and working relationships and responses to things. And, you know, it's created this kind of world of interaction and interdependence and conversation, and 99% of which I will never hear or know. You know, I have no clue. I will never meet these people, but you know, I get occasional emails saying, we read the book out at school, or the kids have made their own books, or we're in hospital and we're reading it with my mum who's dying, or, you know, all these people, these wonderful people that the book and the characters and hopefully the film have threaded through, is very moving to me. And so, you know, it's all one and part of the same thing, about friendships and relationships and interaction and vulnerability and a shared journey. That's what it is.
It's wonderful. Cara and Peter, I want to ask you, like, I guess for Cara, when you like Charlie's saying, the book, I think you could hear that from the way the I guess the grassroots way it kind of started, and like starting as like Instagram illustrations and moving to the book. And I think even in your introduction, Charlie, you say like it's the type of book you could drop in at any point and kind of like you don't need to read it forward, like front to back, right? Like you could just pick and choose and like kind of land on a spot and find something. But at the same time, it works so well as a narrative animated short. I guess for Cara and Peter, can you talk about like what made you think that it would work as a story in a film beyond like as an adaptation, I guess, beyond the written and illustrated word, or as it were?
Well, I think there's there's so much in the book, even though, as you say, people experience the book in a very different way than they normally experience a film, in that the book, you know, Charlie did design as something that could just be opened at any point, and that the reader could spend time enjoying one particular image and one particular thought, or move through a few at their own pace. And when I first saw the book, it was clear that, you know, there was plenty of material there to craft several stories, actually. And really the challenge for us was finding the right, or what we felt was the truest representation of the book within this first film, you know, which really was a process of, at the beginning, deciding what we couldn't include in order to give it a kind of more traditional narrative arc.
Yeah, exactly right.
I was just going to add a thought I had, which was that I think the book has the kind of an integrity at its core. It has a heart, and which is to do with the themes and the message, you know, that these characters kind of gather around, and so I feel like, in a way, sort of the narrative almost feels like, well, there's all sorts of narratives that could happen, but there's a real integrity to the core of what this book is all about. So, and I feel like, well, in that case, you could take that into any like medium, be it film or, you know, indeed Charlie's audio book or like anything. So I feel like that's, you know, as well as those other things. That's why it kind of, you know, just was begging to be made into a film.
Yeah. Can you talk about you Peter and Charlie? Can you talk about how you guys collaborated together? And like Charlie, you were saying how you're kind of writing this like independent, like alone first, right? Like, and then obviously you're putting it out in the world, and you're getting, you know, all that different feedback and stuff. So when you have somebody coming like Peter, how did you guys approach that? And like, what kind of, I guess, Peter, what did you bring to it? Maybe that Charlie you didn't expect, or vice versa. And how did you guys kind of collaborate?
Charlie, who do you want to?
You carry on. Yeah, carry on.
Well, when Charlie's present, I try not to be too nice about Charlie when he's in my presence. So, but it's hard. It's kind of hard to get. I'll just have to say it. Yeah, he's such a talented, such an amazing artist, and he has and I think. And has a wonderful storytelling instincts, and so it, and you know, and also he knows his characters, the world that he's created inside out. Even sometimes if he doesn't know he knows it, kind of thing. Quite often there'd be something where Charlie realized, it's something like it's not that, you know, it's and we'd sort of get to a particular thing through a process of knowing kind of what it shouldn't be, you know, or something like that. But I think well, I guess what I brought to was, you know, I guess my filmmaking experience and sensibilities. That, you know, Charlie's, I mean, I think in a way we had quite it was a good sort of dual perspective thing going on. You know, Charlie hadn't worked in film before and hadn't made an animation, so didn't have necessarily have the kind of tools or the language of, you know, of how to do this thing. And also, I think, if you don't mind me saying, Charlie, I think Charlie, like, he has a visual artist. He has an incredible ability to sort of focus in on a single image and make it beautiful, you know. And obviously, you can see that in all his work. But I think there's sometimes in, you know, and you know, I come at it from like of understanding a single image in the context of thousands of images that like add up to a film. So I think in a way, like those two perspectives, coming at it from a sort of, this single image should be perfect, and I'm coming at it from thinking about, like, you know, the flow of shots, or how sequences relate to each other, or you know, things like that. I think that's kind of why it works well. Plus, I guess we get on reasonably well. Do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, no, it's really good. I thought, I mean, to be truthful,
this is glad, you know, it's just zoned
no,
out.
no, someone just arrived. I
Perfect example.
it was great to work with Peter and
Charlie?
Cara. I think Cara is probably the unsung hero of the film.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
the fact that she's called producer is a gross understatement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was as much involved in direction as any of us, and of the writing of it and construction of it and everything. So, you know, I would sing Cara's praises very highly. And she steered a very difficult ship, you know, trying to inculcate me in my kind of uneducated, slightly ignorant voice. So I think all of us had a journey together to, and one, to be truthful, which is a language we had to develop that none of us knew at the outset. A visual language, how they moved, how the lines were to be, how, you know, all of it was you know, to be discovered.
Sorry, I was just going to say, there was a just thinking about language. I remember really early on, Charlie, I was trying to copy the way Charlie drew. Charlie would look at my drawings and be like, no, not like that. This is really, and there was I remember certain words you used, Charlie, like balancing marks. I think, you know, we were talking about the weight of Charlie's ink at the back of the boy's head and his collar, and underneath his top, and at the bottom of his legs, and you know, part of that was like, oh well, it's to do with where the light is, you know, where the shadow is. But then also Charlie. Yeah, the shadow. But but Charlie introduced this other idea which hadn't even occurred to me, which was I remember you saying they're like balancing marks, and it actually just like balances the drawing, those marks at the bottom. So it was kind of this I was learning a huge amount from, like, you know, learning from Charlie, like how he works and how he thinks.
Well, I think I always felt that if you pause any image, it shouldn't be perfect, but it should work as an abstract. So the marks should balance. You know, so it should satisfy your subconscious. You should feel something beyond the story in terms of weighting of line. I always felt that. But I mean, I obviously was very aware that, you know, I can't remember who it was who worked in America, someone who worked for, I can't remember who it was, who was the head of animation somewhere. And I said, I really feel that if you pause the film anywhere, it should be a perfect drawing. He said, no, you're the animator's nightmare. It should be the opposite. It should be in flow. And I think that was a sort of a wake-up call to my complete ignorance of the process. But also, you know, I'm kind of glad we did try and make every image pretty stunning, because I think if you look at the book of the film now, we've taken 100 or so stills, and I think they've worked. So it's both sides of the coin. But you know, I kind of feel that we even though, you know, I suppose having lived with the characters for 2 or 3 years prior to it and shared the journey of the characters with other people, I had a very strong sense beyond the book of who they were and how they would exist and relate, both, you know, in movement and spatially between each other, all these things that I didn't know I knew until I had to somehow say, this is how the boy needs to stuff his hands in his pockets and lift up his trousers, which I couldn't have said in stills. He needs to brush his hair like that and not neatly. There are ways of moving that the boy creates a certain depth of vulnerability just in the everyday movements of him that I felt very strongly about, rather than just being a, you know, sort of ordinary in movement. I felt like we could develop those, and that was really fun because, you know, you could really push the character or characterizations or the tics or the things they did. The fox shaking his head, and I loved all of that. And of course, for me, I was like a kid in a sweet shop saying, "Can we do this? Can we have this?" And of course, waiting to hear that, "No, you can't, Charlie. You can't have that at all." So I was the child, clueless about what I could or couldn't have. And of course, you know, they all knew way in advance of me. But you know, the journey. I remember when we were developing the boy's face, for instance. I know that I didn't want to have a really clear view of his face because the book doesn't. And I thought there was merit in not, because therefore anyone could project themselves into the boy, or it could be my boy, because I can't quite, you know, it's not. But at some point we had to, for emotional sake, for us getting to know the boy, we needed that. And that was a tough journey for all of us. And Peter was brilliant. Everyone was, you know, I had to do studies of boys' heads, and then we simplified them down. So one day, 6 months later, you know, he arrived on the screen. And I think I ran around the garden screaming, thinking, yeah, that's the boy. So it was a journey of tolerance on their part of me. But I'm thrilled now, because I feel like I've done three degrees in animation. I feel like
you have, Charlie. You have done 3 degrees in animation.
By accident.
The crash course.
And now the awful thing now, Christopher, is that, you know, I had to do these drawings on Sotheby's walls the other day, which is a huge privilege to me. But I found myself working for 2 days and 2 nights doing these massive scale drawings. And what saddened me about it is the fact that I wanted them to walk across the wall and go out the door. I wanted them to move. I was used to seeing them in motion, in and moving between each other and interrelating, and they were just frozen. And it kind of made me feel nostalgic. That's where they began, but frustrated. Then another that I wasn't hearing the music and hearing them speak and all the things that film brings, which has been such a thrill to me. You know, all those extra possibilities that a still silent page cannot bring, you know. Yeah.
Cara, what were you going to say there before?
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that I found fascinating about the process is that even though, Charlie, obviously you created those characters and you know them better than anyone, I think you learnt an awful lot more about them through the process of making the film, because all the discussions that we had on a daily basis about, you know, how would the mole react in this particular situation, and what would the boy do when the fox says this, or, you know, how would the boy sit on the branch in the tree? You know, he's obviously not going to sit still. He's a little boy. He's obviously always going to be shifting around. And what are his little mannerisms? And I think what I found really interesting is that we all got to know the characters really well by the end of it. But I think Charlie got to know them even more too. You know, it was he was part of that process.
You mentioned the characters and stuff and like the visuals, and I want to ask you too about like the voice acting and like casting those roles, I guess. And like specifically, I with the boy, you have Jude Coward Nicole is a newcomer in that role. What was it about his performance and I guess voice that felt like it was right for playing the boy?
You know, we were all very clear that we were looking for a certain fragility and vulnerability in the voice of the boy. You know, we wanted people when they heard the boy's voice to have an instinct to try and take care of him or try and protect him. You know, he announces to us right at the start of the film that he's lost and he's looking for a home, and we all felt incredibly protective about the boy, and that was the quality we were looking for in the boy's voice. You know, a very soft, very gentle, you know, unconfident sounding voice. And it was interesting when we were listening to the reads. We had 320 little boys read for the role. And, you know, they were all brilliant, of course, but a lot of them were, by their very nature, I suppose, they're attracted to acting as a profession. They're doing it for the first time, and they were super confident, you know, and it was just like, it was amazing, but it wasn't what we were looking for in the boy. You know, he needed to have that fragility.
And so had you land, like, did you just audition, or like, was it something like, did you search him out because like some of the other actors are too professional, I guess? Like, how did you kind of find him?
It wasn't a question of professional or not. It was more about personality, you know. Okay. And we had 320 boys read to self-tape for the role, and we narrowed that down to 10 that we auditioned on Zoom. Charlie, Peter, and I auditioned on Zoom, and Jude was just, you know, just instantly a clear favorite in the group.
And Peter, what, I guess I'll definitely ask this of Charlie too, but like, when you heard his performance, I guess, how did that affect how you thought of the character, or how he would, like, did the performance impact the character, I guess, in the way you kind of depicted him in the animation?
You know, of course, yeah, it did. I mean, it did. I think there's a thing that I remember when we first drew the, like, as we were talking earlier about discovering what the boy's face looked like. There was a moment where we had this ink drawing of the boy's face, and it wasn't like, oh, that could be him. It was like, oh yeah, that's him, and that's kind of probably, that's who he was all along. We just hadn't sort of brushed his hair aside or turned it around.
Yeah.
And looked at him. So there was this really lovely feeling of like, oh, of course, that's, you know, almost like it was a providence, or, you know, that's not even that, just like, that's who he is. Oh yeah, of course, that was, you know, it suddenly felt easy in a way that, like, actually the process was difficult. I think with Jude's voice, there was a similar thing where, you know, we heard him, you know, look against the picture of the boy, and it was like, oh yeah, you know, oh yeah, that's him, you know, that's him in there, you know, in a really, like, really lovely and sort of perfect way. And then, but yeah, when we're going through the selects and trying things out, you know, you find these lovely sort of accidents or little sort of moments in the performance that then you know, give the animator or you know, the layout artist or whoever sort of nourishment, you know, for what they're doing. Sure. You know, yeah.
Do you have, like, with the recording process, was he doing it, like, was he with the other actors? Like, did you get to do him on Zoom with, like, Tom Hollander, or is he just doing it with, like, you know, you guys or whoever?
Yeah, it was just with us, and
okay.
And you know, and I think there's, I mean, I think there's this, I think particularly with the boy and the mole, I find there's this lovely rapport, and there's a sort of a lovely musical relationship between their two voices, and then, you know, and so in a way, it's sort of, watching it now, it feels like, oh yeah, they, you know, I'm sure they weren't together in the recording studio. It has, right. You know, I think it has, for me, it has that sort of, like, quality. Yeah. You know? I find they really relate, you know.
And then, did you guys, like, so when you were casting the voices, then was the boy, like, what was the priority for you in finding them? Like, I mean, not like you were rushing through, I'm sure you were waiting to find the right person for each part, but was it like, did you feel like you needed to cast the voice of the boy first before you went through and found the fox, the mole, and the horse? Or was it just like, kind of like, you already knew you wanted, like, Idris Elba for the fox and Gabriel Byrne for the horse and Tom Hollander for the mole, and then you had the boy? Like, did that impact it all, I guess, how it would mesh?
It wasn't like there was a kind of, oh, we unlock that door and then we can move on to the next door. It's sort of, or a sort of it wasn't, one wasn't contingent on the other. It was sort of like finding all four trying to, you know, together. And it was then a question of like, oh, how do these four things sort of mesh? Does it feel right? Yeah.
But we definitely spent a lot of time in edit just trying samples of, where we had more than one actor in mind, potentially. We definitely edited those against each other to see how they felt as a whole. And that was very much part of the process.
That's really cool. Charlie, we're talking about the voice casting here. I mean, we're talking about Jude to playing the boy. I want to actually ask you too, you could speak to him as well, but I want to ask you about Idris Elba for the Fox. I feel like it does add a different flavor to the character, at least from on the page to in the movie, because I think Idris brings such like an initial sinister quality to it that is like revealed to be very kind of like he's such a great actor, and obviously comes through in his performance. But I guess, how did that change how you thought of the Fox, perhaps, with having Idris Elba voice the Fox?
I mean, voices are tricky because if you see a film without a book, the character and the voice, the whole thing is new to you. If you've read a book and you see a film of the book, you've already formed an idea of how they're going to sound. At least you have a voice in your head. And I think it will always shake someone when they first hear the boy, first hear the mole, because they had an idea of what they would sound, and this isn't quite it, or it might be just like it. But for me, I always kind of felt I knew vaguely, I definitely how the boy and the mole sounded, and the horse. The fox is, the fox is a tricky one, but I think Idris landed it so well, because he has an ability to be dark and brooding and threatening in his tone, and he achieved that very well. So I definitely think that once I heard the voices, it gave me a deeper understanding of the characters. So it's almost like, particularly strangely with the boy. I mean, the boy I think when you're making a film with real people, whatever you call it, real time, what's it called when you actually have real people?
Live action.
So when you film a live action film, I'm pretty convinced that actors can bring something to the table that you go, oh yeah, that's I've heard stories of this happening that are not in the script. Whereas with animation, it's so tight. A second takes a month of it. You can't really have outtakes going, oh yeah, look at that, or you can't waste time. But I think the boy, when we were recording him, Jude said a line, and the tone of which I'd never heard, and it changed everything about how I saw the boy. And it was when the horse said, the voice says, "Are you all right?" And the horse says, "Something I haven't told you." And the voice says, "What?" He says, "I can fly." And the voice says, "You can fly?" He says, "Yes, but I stopped and made the other horse jealous." And then the boy's response in my head for 3 years had been this: well, we love you, whether you can fly or not. As in, well, we are different to the others, right? But Jude said, well, we love you, whether you can fly or not. And the emphasis was on love and not we. So there was no comparison. There was no moral superiority. It was just a very pure way and that shook me to the core, because I felt that I was pushing onto the boy my own brokenness and need for comparison, whereas he didn't have that. And so he introduced to me a new purity and innocence to the boy that I didn't have, because of course, when your own emotions are mixed into a character, you sometimes don't get the character you're looking for. You're too overbearing. And so I'll never forget the moment I heard him say that line. I will never forget it, because I remember thinking, oh my gosh, but that's how the boy would have said it, not how I've been thinking it for 3 years.
That's amazing.
And it was, do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I learned so much in that 1 month. I learned more about myself and how far I was from, what I could be, just in that one intonation. I'll never forget it.
Wow.
Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It really does. I just, like I said, I think the voice cast is great. And I think we've been talking here, like you talked about how, I feel like this works so well because visually you could just, with no sound, I feel like you could watch this and get everything. If you had just the voice, if you're listening to it, I think you would get it. And then the music as well, I feel like with the score from Isabel Waller-Bridge is just beautiful. And you can watch it with just the music and the visuals and still get it.
Oh, that's so lovely.
I do find it it's just fascinating that it works in all of those different facets.
And in
I
black
know in the
and
book,
white, and just in black and white, you know, as
sure,
lines.
yeah, of course. Well, like, and I know in the book you have like on the front cover and the back cover you have sheet music, I think, or like
Right.
bridging it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about
Yeah.
the like how you thought the music should be versus how it ended up sounding, and like how like you kind of like worked on that and how the score kind of came together, I guess, with your input.
I think, you know, Christopher, it's not how I thought it should be. I knew how I wanted it to make us feel.
Okay.
You know, and that's the important thing. It's not so much, you know, what the ingredients were, but how it tasted. And I think how it tasted was the thing we were looking for, how it made us feel, how our emotion, you know, the book is really, I mean, the film's really about emotions. It's about connection and emotions and all the things that we have. And, you know, I always felt that the film score would, if you began watching it at the beginning and ended it and saw it right through, that you would feel differently about existence or about yourself or about the world, and you would feel more comforted and more peaceful and calm. And that's different. So I guess there was a sort of an aim for me about the emotion of how it should. Obviously, a score plays along to some of the actions, and there's terror and fear and storms and things. But generally speaking, you know, the overall flavor of the score for me needed to be one of assurance, gentleness, calm, love, you know, stillness, all those things. And I think Izzo achieved that. I think, you know, it was interesting because I think when we saw a what do you call it, a trailer of the film, and it was made by, you know, it was brilliant. It was made by, I think, I don't know who made it, but it was quite kind of, it was multi-layered and super quick, and the music was different. And I'm thinking that's a very dynamic sound, and it's it's beguiling and wow, but it's actually doesn't have the stillness, it doesn't have the calm, it doesn't have what you know, the slowness of the journey and intensity of it. And I remember I learned a lot because I suddenly thought, oh gosh, have we made the wrong music? Have we made a terrible mistake because this music? But actually, no, I think
no.
Yeah, no, the score is awesome and it works so well with the
movie.
Oh, good.
I'm glad you think so.
No,
I mean, Isabel's a legend, isn't she? I mean,
she's amazing.
Yeah.
Cara, you mentioned before, like how there's like, there could have been so many, I mean, this world, it's like, you have the characters in this world and you could go in a lot of different directions and probably tell further stories in the world or whatever. But I guess, you know, like the thing of with this specific film, I was like, it seems so tough to make content or films or movies or whatever, or shows that are like kind of annual. I wanted to say, like, it feels like obviously this is a story that, like, I think Charlie in the book, you say it could be from like 8 to 80, you know, it doesn't have like, it's not just for kids, even though it's animated, but I was like, it does feel like something that people would want to revisit. And I guess it has a very timeless quality in its message. And I don't think you could actually try to do that probably intentionally, but obviously you'd have done that here. So I guess, can you talk about like threading that needle, you guys, all of you, Peter, as well, like how you kind of how do you create something timeless without making it feel forced to be timeless? You know what I mean? Like, we're not forcing something that could be like an annual watch for people, but like it happens to be something that probably could be an annual watch for people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, I think Charlie's artwork does have that feeling anyway. It feels incredibly classical and like it could have been created at any time. And obviously that was our guiding light all the way through the making of the film, was constantly referring back to the book and making sure that we weren't either missing anything or adding anything that took anything away from the original intention of the book. And that included not trying to root it in any particular time, like certainly not trying to root it in now, in 2022, or even tying it to the events of the recent years that everyone's been through. We definitely made a conscious effort to try and create something that would feel timeless, by not referencing anything that was specific to now. Yeah.
And Peter, how about you, from like a visual standpoint, making it feel like something that I think could be like, if you show me this and told me it was like 40 years old or from 40 years in the future, I'd be like, yes, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like very much like detached from a moment. And I find that really fascinating. I guess, can you talk about that too?
Yeah, well, there's a few things, I guess. There's, you know, the way, I mean, you know, the way like CG kind of, you can date CG like quite easily because it's a technology that's progressing. I think one thing is, I think I have like very traditional approach. It's like, maybe makes it feel kind of timeless. It's just, you know, it's when it comes down to it, it's as simple as like painting, you know, painted backgrounds and hand-drawn characters. So I think just the whole like approach to how we made it gives it that quality. I can also think like at every single point, like you can pause the film anywhere, like we were saying earlier, and you know, but I think you can also pause it with a view to oh, there's the siren. You hear the siren?
I can't hear that. Well, that's fine.
You can pause it, and I can tell you there's a story or a discussion like you know that we had that revolves around like any moment in the whole film. You know, several things in every single shot we debated and figured out. And I think what we were always trying to get to was, again, this integrity at its core. And I think in a way, like we weren't trying to do anything like sort of like fancy for the sake of it. You know, if anything, we were trying to pull stuff away. We'd go through sequences that we'd storyboarded, you know, a couple of times, and still be thinking, well, we can just simplify this and boil it down to, you know, pull out shots and give the thing more space and make the thing feel sort of quieter and slower and things like that. So I think I guess I kind of think that gives it a quality that doesn't in the now as well. And then I also think there's very specific things, you know, right there you don't see any like man-made objects in it or anything. Even I think with the boys' clothes, I remember when we were, you know, with Charlie's drawings, remember at the very start, we were saying, Charlie, what is the boy wearing? And some of the storyboard artists would draw, they just assumed that the boy was wearing a hoodie, because sometimes Charlie draws it and it feels like he's kind of wearing a hood and there's a sort of bagginess that suggests hoodie. And then other people would be like, no, I think it's a collared shirt sort of thing. It looks like a collar. And Charlie, you know, we were saying, Charlie, what is this thing that he's wearing? And Charlie would be like, oh, it's like this, and he'd do a drawing, and you'd be like, well, that does look an awful lot like a hoodie there, but. And they do another one, and you think, oh, well, that kind of looks like a collar, you know. So there was sort of, it was, but then this one day came where Charlie sent a photo that he had found of it was an old photo from the I don't know when, 100 years ago in New Orleans, in the bottom corner of the photo is this boy, and he's wearing this strange kind of smock top with this strange like collary thing. And Charlie's like, that's what he's wearing. You know, it's that. So, you know, and it was this kind of weird old-fashioned garment. So I think even like this, you know, coming down to the specifics of what he's wearing, it doesn't date it particularly to the.
We can send you that image if it's helpful, if you want to cut that in.
Yeah, I'd like to see it for sure. We do have to wrap up here, but I mean, just hearing you guys talk about the collaboration of this and just how it came together is really fascinating. So I'm so glad we got to do this chat, even for a brief amount of time. The team behind The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which is coming to Apple TV Plus on Christmas Day here in America, and I'm sure around the world. Author, illustrator, co-writer, co-director Charlie Mackesy, co-director Peter Baynton, and producer Cara Speller. Thank you all so much for doing this. It was great chatting.
Thank you so much for having us. Thanks, Christopher.